welcome to the Design Rescue Show, where we take a behind-the-scenes look at the unique journeys of creative professionals, and we learn about the choices they've made that have shaped their career paths. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you once again for joining us today. I am your host, David Block. Today, we're joined by a graphic designer, creative director, branding expert, and YouTube design educator with a following of almost 900,000 subscribers, Will Paterson.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, David. It's cool to be here.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your being on the Design Rescue Show. The show is basically a behind-the-scenes look at your career journeys. Let's dive right in. I like to start at the very beginning. I like to talk about and find out your initial kind of interest in the design industry. So I'm curious, did your interest in design come from a result of schooling, or did you go to university?
I didn't go to uni. No, I'll take you through my story. Really short version. There's videos online where I talk about it more. But the best way to explain it is I did terrible at school, but I knew I wanted to be a businessman. In the UK, the way that our school system works is slightly different to American school systems, where you have this one exam session. So you have all your sciences and your English and everything at the age of 15. And that will dictate what happens to you for the rest of your life, whether you get a job or not, whether you go to university. So I didn't do well in those exams, not because I was stupid, but because I think I just worked differently. Failed all the exams, so I couldn't get anywhere. And I decided I'll go to a technology college, which is more of like, it's not a university, it's a bit different, to study business administration. I thought that meant to study business studies, learn how to make a business. However, it was not. It was all about learning how to be a secretary. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I left that after the second year. It was like a 3-year course. And I said, I'm going to do design. I just had this idea that I had a friend who did design work, and I was like, I want to do that. I reckon I could be freelance and be a businessman through that. So I spent the next like 3-4 years in my parents' house. And this is from age 16, 17, in my parents' house, who very kindly let me stay longer because I wasn't going to university, and learned through reading books and from tearing apart design work that I've seen in the real world. And then I went into branding because I couldn't afford fonts. I learned Logotype design and hand lettering, so I became obsessed with type. And that's where I sort of had my first real break in client work. I had my neighbor give me some work. And all the while through that, I was looking through tutorials and couldn't find any of things that I needed. So I would learn myself how to do it, and then I would teach it on YouTube in a tutorial. And that's how I initially brought my audience up to speed with me. And then when I wanted to do a bit more, like talk about the nuances of the industry, that's when I started doing more vlogging and critiquing. And yeah, that's basically how it went.
Interesting. So you became a blogger early on.
Yeah. So at the start, I had one video that did well, which was how to export splines from Adobe Illustrator to Cinema 4D. And that was like something that no one knew how to do. So I found a way through a forum. Someone on a forum told you how to do it. So I would just make a video. And then obviously from doing that, I'll be promoting myself. I created a portfolio. One of the things that I did very early on is, even though I had no client work, I would do fake portfolios, because I figured, well, no one else is going to give me a job unless they can see my process and how I do it. So I created this portfolio for a coffee shop called Bean or something. And yeah, and people saw that. I got more client work from that. And ever since then, we've just been sharing my journey on social media, Instagram and everything else, until the point of where we had a lot of work. We worked with some like larger names, and we had to hire people to help us. And overnight we became an agency. So,
right.
And that's a weird story, because people think I'm a freelancer, but I'm not.
Okay, all right. So could you talk about one of your first major projects that helped sort of that was pivotal in your career choices? It's like
Yeah.
pushing it towards branding.
Yeah, there was a company called Mas. It was a dude called Mascon Leather, and he's on Instagram. And it was back in the day, it was about 8-9 years ago now, where there's a lot of like leather makers. So people would make wallets from leather, handcrafted, and he called himself Mascon Leather. And he wanted a logotype because he saw my hand lettering on Instagram. He saw that the work was like kind of vintage rustic, which is what a lot of my old work used to be like, very 1930s feeling. And he wanted a logo, so I essentially worked with him on this design, and his account blew up, and he was just promoting it the whole time, the fact that I did his logo, because he was so happy with it. And it's like a logotype with a shell. It's very minimal, but also vintage at the same time. It's got this kind of modern feeling with a wink of 1900s, late 1800s, So he was promoting that. And then a company called Beard of Man, I don't know if they're still going on now. I did a logo for them because they saw my work on Instagram and my portfolio. The sort of way it went was people would find me on social media, then go to my website. Then that's where I proved I could do what I do. And then they would get in contact.
Oh, that's great. Okay. And so jumping a little bit forward,
Sure.
looking through your portfolio, you've got a fantastic portfolio of work. You worked with some major companies. I know they're very different clients, but H&M, Squarespace, Adobe, Net Magazine. And I'm curious, they are very different, but I'd like to hear some of the challenges that you face in working with some of these large companies.
Well, I worked with Instagram a few years ago before they did their they had something called geo stickers, where it was before like GIFs or GIFs, however you say it, became a thing, where if you're in a certain location and you did a story, you'd be able to put in a sticker. And I did one for London, Gatwick, and somewhere else, and Shoreditch. So I did some lettering for them. That was interesting. They didn't ask for any revisions. They just liked the work. So that's one of the most interesting ones. Another, like for other companies, I can't really talk about it too much. We've worked with a lot more people than our portfolio says. The problem is that when you get into the industry, you don't realize a lot of these companies want you to be secret behind the scenes because they've got design teams themselves. And you're just essentially mentoring the design teams, and they're looking for outward perspectives. So right now we're working for a company on a few different companies, but I can't talk about them for years until either they're out in the open or until they give me permission, including we worked with like someone that everyone would know. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating because we've worked with someone that everyone would know, and we know it would transform the business even more so if we could tell them, but we can't tell them until they just say yes. And they've said no. But that's what we agreed to. And I'm not annoyed about that. It's just what it is. But the biggest problems I can say in general, I can't do specifics, but in general that I have is the presentation side. When I'm presenting directions, we sort of present our work probably slightly differently than the average agency or the average freelancer. But when we present our work, the way that we try to get the client to accept isn't by selling, but by directing. So a client will generally believe what we say, which is good because we like to think we know what we're talking about. But we allow them to share their thoughts, but in an environment where they can't nitpick at the design. Because as you might be aware, when someone says something about a design, everyone will go, "Oh yeah, I see that now." And then they'll say no. They'll say no. And then when the higher up says no, everyone lower down in the hierarchy will agree with them, even though it's wrong what they said, or even though like it's just one little issue. So that's one problem. Another challenge that you'll have is showing them something that is bad, but you're showing them for context. So for instance, a sketch, it looks terrible. But then on the edge of what you're showing them on the paper, there's another sketch and it looks awful. And they will say, what about that? I want that logo.
Right.
And you can't stop them. You have to, that derails the whole process, because what you've done, or what I realized very fast, was that you're allowing them to pick and mix. You're allowing them to choose what they want. But in reality, they're not. They hired you to choose for them in collaboration with them. So those are some of the big turning points. Other ones are, stupid people wanting, and this is very far and few between, but I've had a few stupid people ask for stupid things in designs, and I've had to go and do them to prove them wrong, or to prove my case, so side by side sort of situation. Most clients aren't like that, though. In fact, I've only had that twice. So
okay. Wow. All right. So now about your channel, I want to ask you a couple of questions about your channel.
Sure.
How do you decide the topic for your next video? Now, in your latest video, the 3 advanced logo design techniques, which I thought was really, really great. Had some great tips in there.
Thank
One
you.
specific was when you talked about choosing fonts by time period, which was, I mean, I don't know why I never thought of that. But I'm curious. It's a simple concept, but how did you discover that technique, and how do these things come to you?
Yeah, I guess it sounds better than it really is. We already do it. It's just for the brand new folk who are very new to this. They might not understand that type is classified by time.
Right.
So we all know that Times New Roman is an old style font. We all know it because it's kind of serifs. It's full of serifs. It just looks old. A solicitor firm would have that. So there's the appropriate feeling that we're trying to get across. So when I said by time period, it's because of this book over here, which is huge. I'm sure you've got it. It's the Visual History of Type. It shows you by time period, and that gives you a really good basis of understanding how type sort of evolved from obviously Latin to Old English and things like that. So when you do it by time period, you can really make people understand whether it's going to be future, like SpaceX, or whether you want it to be old school, like, I don't know, Harley Davidson, which is like, 1950s, something like that.
Right.
But that was quite modern back then. So it's always changed by type.
If you're enjoying this video, please take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you. Now, you've produced a wide array of videos ranging from, type design, analyzing logos, graphic design trends, Illustrator hacks. And do you take, I'm curious about how you choose the next video. Do you take into account design trends, or is it your own personal kind of interest, or do you look at what the audience is wanting to see?
Yeah, good question. It's not what they want to see, it's what they need to know. So the big thing with YouTube is you can't control how many people watch a video, but you can control how long it's relevant for. So a lot of the time you'll see people getting millions of views, which is brilliant. There's an amazing guy called Brandon Shepard, who I'm good friends with, who gets like millions of views on his design videos because he's bridged the gap between entertainment and design. He's got it perfect, and he's just a very talented dude. But with me, I'm kind of like an educator like yourself. So some topics are going to be quite boring, but they are necessary. I need to talk about this sort of thing. So the way that we've sort of strategized YouTube is, as long as the content that we're putting out, if it's like a tutorial or like a nugget of information that will help someone in their journey, if it lasts 5 to 10 years on YouTube, whilst it's still relevant, we will put a lot of effort into that, and we won't expect mad views. We will expect, trickled views. People are searching for this, and then they might see it on their homepage, or maybe they don't know how to craft a portfolio. Maybe they don't know some logo design techniques. So the way that we do these videos is evergreen. We want to make sure that people can rock up to the video, watch it, take it away with them, and then in 5 years' time, if they just need to watch it again, then they can, and it's still relevant then.
Absolutely. Excellent. Okay. So now, I'd love to hear about your logo launch project, your new course. First of all, when did you launch that? When did that start?
I think it was in September last year. It's a soft launch. So Logo Launch is essentially the course for bespoke logo type design and brand identity or visual identity. I saw a big problem. Everyone's designing generic designs, like generic logos. It sounds bad, but I'm seeing it everywhere. You get abstract logos, and everyone's using fonts. And part of the reason why I learned hand lettering and calligraphy, logotype design, and all that is because I couldn't afford fonts, the licenses. Not that you need to buy the most expensive font license for logo design. You just need the desktop version, because you're just outlining the font afterwards. It becomes a shape. So I saw this big problem that people were designing similar logos everywhere. And one reason why we can charge what we charge is because we have a specialized skill set in logo type design. We craft fonts, we craft letters by hand into the computer, and it creates a very unique and bespoke look. It gives us more control, and people pay for more bespoke work. In the design industry, you can rightfully charge more for that rather than just, designing an icon, which isn't saying anything bad about icons. So I thought, well, no one knows how to do this because it's quite an old-fashioned thing. Like, there's like a lot of principles out there that people don't know when it comes to crafting a logotype. So the whole course takes you from a project that we did with another design agency, strangely enough, called Made by Raleigh. They do design, and they're essentially a creative agency for athletes. I walk you through the entire process of how we craft a logotype, how we present that, and some of the psychological tricks that you can use that they don't trick the client. Some tips, psychological tips to get the client to really understand the design and not to screw you up when presenting. So it's a course designed to make you more money. That's basically what it is.
That's so logo launch is available now, and anybody can sign up for that, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's like $150, but you can split it by 3 payments. And if you're from a country where you struggle with that currency, just reach out to us.
Got it. Okay. Now, I'm curious about how you keep yourself sort of updated with your skills. So, obviously the design industry has gone through, if we look at the last, 50 years, digital revolution in the 80s and 90s, the rise of web design. We've got the rise of motion graphics and social media, and of course, AI and machine learning. So how do you personally keep yourself, your skills updated?
The way that we do it is we have real clients. A lot of educators would stop, I think. Yeah. Especially online. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, it is a lot more difficult to remain sharp, because when you're working professionally, you've got stakes, you've got skin in the game. So you've got to make sure that the work's correct and it's not trendy, because that's not how we do work. Our work is anything but trendy. But it forces you to keep your skills sharp. So one thing that I've always said is, doesn't matter how well YouTube does, I will always have clients. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm the only one working on it. We have designers that work on things with us. In fact, everything that we do now is not just me. It's me and other designers together, because we get a lot of projects. So to remain sharp, that's how we sort of work. The other way that we do that is by messing around. Like, if we want to create something like this poster behind me, I was just in Illustrator. That's a poster of my town's castle. We have like an actual castle in our town. And I wanted to just make a poster about that. So I got inspired by Aaron Draplin and the tattooist effect. and I went ahead and created it. And that's just one way.
Just to jump right in, yeah, actually, that's what I teach my students is, and that's how I learned, right? I mean, in the very beginning, I actually learned design by simply opening the program and messing around, making errors, fixing those errors, and just learning as I go. So
That's all it is, fixing errors.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Life
you never
is
know
about
what will go.
right.
Totally. I think like I used to say it all the time, but it's called failing to success. So a lot of folk might look at what we do and think, oh, hell, if I could just like get there, or he's so wise, he knows what he's doing. But then I'm thinking, why do these people think I'm so wise, and why are they so interested? Because we just failed a lot more. Like, you can actually probably put a chart together of like folk like Christo and everyone else who have, like, in their design careers and business careers, the reason why they succeeded a lot more is because they were willing to fail a lot more in that. So for every like one success that we have like loads of failures in design as well.
Right. So, but I want to ask you one final question. Now, in terms of advice for aspiring designers, so from your experience, how important is it for new designers to focus on a specific area of logo design or area of design in general early in their career versus building a broad kind of skill base?
It depends. I think we talk a lot about niching. You'll see it on Instagram. Everyone says, oh, you should niche down because you can target more people for money, like certain industries. I think skill set, you should have a wide skill set. I think you should, from the get-go, if you're beginning this, you should try everything. Within graphic design, there's a lot of subsets. You could become a UX designer, a user experience designer, a UI designer. You could become a font designer. You could become a logotype designer, a brand identity strategist. There's so much stuff you can do. However, I think in order to focus effectively on one thing, and it's not niching, this is why I call it something different. I call it specializing. In order to focus on one thing, you need to have the repertoire of everything else. So you should be able to have a basic understanding. It doesn't have to be professional, but a basic understanding of everything else. So, for instance, layout, composition, hierarchy is like the main principles that we have in graphic design. You need to learn that for everything else. Otherwise, anything else that you create is going to not look very good, because that's just the basis that we live in. But if you are one day saying, I want to be a logo designer, what you shouldn't do is just go straight into logo design. Feel free to do logo design more. That's perfectly fine. But make sure you're crafting time for yourself to learn more about, UI design. So for instance, I'm not a UX designer or UI designer, but we're currently working on like this small documentary for something called dark patterns. It's a manipulative design that we see in apps and softwares and even store layouts. That's all been cleverly designed to trick us into purchasing or spending more time on a platform or being unable to cancel. That's all being intentionally created. And I wouldn't have known about that if I didn't learn about it, even though I don't do any user experience design or whatsoever. I want to learn. So I read books about things like that, research. And then from there, once you say, I want to do logo design, that's one way to specialize in something. So I specialize in logotype design and brand identity. So it's a specialization. I can do everything else, not very well, but I can do logotype design. And then from there, you can niche down into industry. So you're not niching your skills, you're niching your industry, because it's not how good you are at something, it's how someone knows you. It's not what you know, it's who you know, kind of thing. Or even better, a great platitude for any new people out there. You don't have to be the best, just be their favorite. If you're just their favorite person to work with, they will work with you. That's just the way it goes. You can have the best logo designer on the planet, but if he doesn't know anyone, if he doesn't connect with people, have a great portfolio that explains the behind the scenes of what they do, that's what makes an effective portfolio, which is to essentially share the mystery of what the client wants to know. Right. Then if you don't do that, no one's going to work with you. But if you do that, your work could be like not as good as someone else's, and then they will work with you because you're being honest with them. You've intrigued them.
Excellent. So final question, one last question. This just came to my head. I'm curious if you had one habit that you could ask new designers to try to create for themselves, one habit that you think they should adopt, what would that habit be? And yeah, what would that habit be?
Yeah, don't be precious about your work. A lot of designers, they get paper. I mean, there's one habit there, actually. Start on paper, doesn't matter what you do, but you'll get your paper and you'll be really precious about it. You'll have a pencil that's your favorite pencil and you'll be really precious about it. Yeah. When you're designing or doing something, it should just be slapdash at first. You just want to get ideas out of your head. Everyone talks about the process, and the process is huge when it comes to design. You have like a framework. It's what allows you to create without being in a vacuum. If for any of your designers out there, don't be precious about the paper you're working on. Use scrap paper to do all your sketching on, and force yourself to design whatever you're doing in different ways, one design a minute for an hour without using an eraser. And that will stop you being precious, and you'll generate ideas that you didn't think you could.
Excellent. Fantastic. That's great advice. And once again, Will, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy man. You got a lot going on, and I'll keep an eye on your channel for your next video. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. It's been great.